welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include them in our role-playing campaigns. With me, back again after a long hiatus, it seems.
Longer than I realized.
I know, we were just talking about it off podcast. Is the wonderful Keith Ammann. Hello, friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, well, no, pleased to have you back because last time you were on, we talked about more the monsters know what they're doing, obviously, because you are really in with sort of like knowing about the tactics and stuff. Obviously, you've got your Emmy Award-winning blog. And since then, obviously, the world's turned and changed, and you've written a few more books, and you're back again to talk about your new venture. But I just want to check in with you with the world as it is, and obviously years have gone by. How has your gaming been? Like, are you still doing lots of home games? Obviously, I know you've been writing, but like, how's the gaming scene gone for you recently?
You know, it's actually been a little bit bumpy. And part of the reason for that is that so much of it has gone online. You know, I know for a lot of people, being able to do tabletop quote unquote gaming by Zoom or Discord or Google Chat or whatever, Google Meet, is for them, it's like this revolutionary, wonderful thing. And I kind of don't like it. I really long for the face-to-face in-person gaming. It's just got a completely different kind of energy.
100%.
And a lot of the time I feel like my screen games just start to, lose air like a leaky balloon. They lose energy, and it's disappointing. We've still managed to keep our main D&D group going, the one that first came together back in 2015, 2016, when we first started playing 5th edition D&D. And that's still going, not quite as clockwork every single week. Part of it is that, people have moved out of state to other places. And so doing it face-to-face simply is not feasible anymore. It has to be online. I think something is lost in that. And we just haven't had as many opportunities for face-to-face gaming as in the past.
It's interesting because, like, for me, I've done lots of obviously online stuff myself, and I've been doing. For me, I do lots of improvisation, and I used to do a lot of it in person, and then now we've transferred to a lot of it online still for me to take classes, in different countries and stuff like that. And I see it as like there's pros and cons of it. And the pros is that, I get to take classes or I get to connect with people from around, but it's not the same as performing on a stage. And I think the same thing, we miss those non-verbal cues or being in the room and having that energy. And it's so much harder when you're online that you have to accommodate for it. And I think you lose something with both of them. But it's one of those things where I've kind of accepted that now. Like, I know, like, the most game time I can do is maybe 2 hours, and I need a break and then come back. I can't do the full all day sessions online because, as you said, you get distracted. The energy sort of goes out the room because it feels, especially most people are now working from home or working on their computers, then to go into another meeting, quote unquote.
Yeah. It almost feels like an extension of your workday sometimes. And there's always that even if it's just microseconds, that addition of that little bit of extra delay is often enough to throw off people's timing. It's like the side waltz. When you're walking down the sidewalk and you run into somebody and you're both going back and forth trying to get out of each other's way, that happens in the conversation. Right. Yeah. Where people start talking at the same time and it's like, oh no, you go. But they're saying that at the same time too. And yeah, but if it's the trade-off of you game on a screen or you don't game at all.
Yeah. Some people don't get to do it at all.
Most people would choose the screen. Now, the one upside in these last few years is I've actually finally gotten to branch out and try a few different systems. So I've tried Court of Blades, which is Sean and Navi Drake's hack of Blades in the Dark in that kind of late Renaissance / Restoration, Paris, Venice kind of fantasy setting. We've done a little bit of Knave, a little bit of Shadowdark, and some Call of Cthulhu using Chris Spivey's Harlem Unbound. which is a wonderful book. So, you know, we've gotten to spread out a little bit, stretch our wings.
Because that's shown in your latest book, obviously, Making Enemies, is that, and do correct me if I'm wrong on this, because obviously previously your work focused on D&D, mostly 5th edition. Obviously now I know, looking at the new edition, the 2024 sort of rule set. But then in this book, Making Enemies, you cover ways to create monsters, not only for D&D, obviously Pathfinder, but the Cypher System, Shadowdark, and Call of Cthulhu. And yeah, that was my big question, was like, why include these particular systems in your latest book?
The first 3 books, true, were exclusively D&D. Those were The Monsters Know, Live to Tell, and More Monsters. The 4th book that I wrote, How to Defend Your Lair, which is all about basically area defense, location and area defense. All of my examples in that were using the D&D rules, but I tried to make the principles I was introducing as universally applicable as possible. So if a reader preferred a different system, they could still take these ideas and find their own way to implement it in these systems. And it was just the rule sets I was drawing on and the examples I was giving were specifically D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So in the time after writing How to Defend Your Lair, when I was mentally organizing and generating ideas for Making Enemies, a couple of things were going on.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was the OGL fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there were a lot of people saying, I'm never going to play D&D again because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, some of those people are going to come back.
Yes.
But some of them aren't. And I wanted to be sure if there were people in my readership who saying, I am done with D&D because of this, I'm going to move on to other things, that I could keep them as readers. I mean, basically, I don't want you to ditch me because of something these people over here did.
Yes.
And I had been feeling for a while like it would be wise to expand my base beyond just 5th edition D&D. And this gave me a very compelling reason to do that. And it suggested ways to do that. And so Making Enemies is not a truly system agnostic book, but I like to describe it as system ecumenical because there are universally applicable principles in it, but there are also examples and guidelines for implementation system by system. And so I asked, what would be a good collection of systems that I could use to illustrate all of these examples, all of these principles that I'm talking about? So I settled on D&D, Pathfinder, Cypher, and Call of Cthulhu. And the reasons I chose those varied, but it had to do with a combination of size of audience and also what segment of the gaming public they represented. So for example, Pathfinder is the obvious competitor to D&D if you're playing wild high fantasy. It's been popular a long time. It's gotten fresh energy with the remastered core books. So obviously there was going to be a chunk of people who wanted to see how all this worked for that. Shadowdark has been a very popular and justifiably very popular entry in that OSR quasi. I mean, there's a lot of debate over whether Shadowdark is truly OSR or not, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Whether it is or not. It's a neat game, and I have enjoyed playing it as much as I have, and a lot of people like it. So to me, that's a good enough reason to include it, you know. And I don't think there's any other single OSR game that has the energy right now that Shadowdark does.
Agreed.
Cypher System is a kind of universal RPG, an inheritor of the Mantle of GURPS. for those who remember GURPS, and a popular system for people who want to play something that is not necessarily wild high fantasy, or that takes a different approach to it. And then, of course, Call of Cthulhu is the horror entry, wildly popular, has been for decades, and is still hanging in there. It's evergreen. It's still got tons and tons and tons of tables of people playing it at Gen Con. And that's basically what I used as my yardstick. How many tables of people are playing this at Gen Con? I'm going to choose the top 5 that actually seem to have bearing on what I'm talking about. So I skipped Vampire the Masquerade because Vampire the Masquerade is not a game that you need to create monsters for, that the player characters are going to go up against. The player characters are the monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
In that game, you know, so it's a different animal. And I probably could have, if I, you know, had wanted to, gone into Starfinder or some of the more hard science fiction games out there. But that's a smaller market, and I was already writing a very long book.
I mean, yeah, it is just clocking under like sort of under 600 pages, Making Enemies itself.
I had no idea how much book I was writing. I'm like, when I finally sat down and saw the word count, I'm like, oh my.
I like the fact that you went for 5. Yeah, you sort of use that yardstick of like, oh, the top 5 at Gen Con. But in my head, I was like, yeah, these are popular. Like I was like, yeah, Call of Cthulhu, it's everywhere, and also very popular in countries that aren't in the West, because obviously I know a lot of RPGs, when we're looking at them now, they have a Western feel to it, but having that popularity around the world, great. Cypher System, yeah, totally makes sense to me. As you said, it's that sort of setting neutral, so you could be anything on it. And then, yeah, the sort of top fantasy ones, but also you can play any kinds of stories in it. So it instantly thought to me, yeah, a good SEO work, I think, for yourself there. But it made sense to like, well, where can we go from here? And yeah, of course, as you rightly said, like the OGL stuff has been that sort of point in RPG history now, which we'll look back and we'll see a lot has happened because of this, and new Kickstarters, new games, and hopefully more stories can be told. So yeah, might as well capitalize in sort of a way on trying to branch out for yourself, not only as a individual, but also to get other people to try something that's not just one single game. Yeah, interesting to be like, wow, this is the first time I'd seen, and justifiably so, a book this long, but taking the time to detail and give the actual like thought to like, oh yeah, not just like, oh, don't worry about this. Like obviously I know in certain, when you're creating certain or showcasing sort of the monsters as you're sort of doing the philosophy and then showcasing it, you then go, this doesn't necessarily apply to this particular system, and that's fine. But I think justifying it like that, I know like some of the Call of Cthulhu ones, I really liked your tone in it, going like, the world is stacked up against them as it is. You're not going to have this monster for that. Yeah. But I think that's true. But as long as you have those ideas, it can be applied to like at least 4 out of the 5 systems or whatever. Great, I guess then my big question, obviously, we're here to talk about making enemies. Why this, but why enemies and villains? Because obviously before it was like looking at the sort of tactics and sort of like how you would play monsters, and then shifting over to this side of it. What was the sort of spark to write about this?
There was a video that Teos Abadia posted on his YouTube channel, Alpha Stream, in which he was talking about how to decide what kinds of projects to apply yourself to. If you're independently writing content, what should you be focusing your energy on? And he was talking about how you should look at not only what you think there's going to be a market for, but also what you love writing about, and also what is going to devour your time and energy in an unproductive way versus what's going to energize you to write about it. And he recommended breaking it down into a bunch of categories like writing settings, writing rules from scratch, designing monsters, creating packages of NPCs or classes or subclasses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he recommended giving each of those a rating on terms of how excited it gets you, how much of your energy and time it takes, and so forth. And when I did all that, monsters came up near the top, because I like dealing with that. And also, for me, I've been working in that vein for quite a while now. And so it doesn't suck up my time and energy the way writing an entire campaign length adventure might, or writing an entire setting might. I know it's going to give me good return on investment. The other thing was, Teos, of course, has a popular podcast that he does with the designer Sean Merwin called Mastering Dungeons. And the last time I was on with them, which I think also might have been 4 years ago, certainly sometime back, they described me as a designer of monsters. And I was like, well, I'm not really a designer of monsters. I reverse engineer the monsters. It's not the same as creating them. And they said, well, even so, we would still love to see your thoughts on creating monsters. And so that remained in my head. And when I did that exercise that Teos recommended of rating all the different things and deciding where it would be best to put my energies, and saw that floating near the top, that told me that was the approach I should take. And so I did.
Yeah, no, I like it because, it feels obviously very different to your other books. As you said before, you were sort of reverse engineering, but here it's like, okay, how do we create a monster or a villain or an enemy for your campaigns? And obviously you break it down in a really good way of, like, first of all, like, and obviously I feel like this, and again, I'm sure you'll tell me if not, is that you could do any of these approaches in any order. It doesn't.
Yes.
There's not one way you should do it. You shouldn't go from A to B to C.
Yeah, it's not a checklist. It's a toolbox. It's a variety of things you can use to inspire yourself as you create.
Yeah.
Paired with some guidelines to help you in the actual implementation.
Right.
And you say it's a departure, but I will say there is a very definite through line in all my books. And in terms of tone, I would say this one is closest to How to Defend Your Lair. But in all of them, all of these books originated as exercises that I was doing to teach myself, to help myself understand things that I felt like I understood incompletely, and to educate myself further on. That's how the Monsters Know What They're Doing, the blog, began. That is how to Defend Your Lair began, because I was expanding on some ideas I had previously expressed about defensible space. And that's how this began. I was driving back on vacation with my family, and I just asked my spouse to take a pencil and a pad of paper. And I said, I'm just going to brainstorm some stuff that might go into monster design. Can you write these down for me? And she wrote it all down. And that was my outline. That became my outline.
That's really good. Yeah. So, because you talk about, like, almost like how I would term the logistics at the beginning. So, like, how many monsters may you have? What's their size? Where would we categorize them? Are they like the first foes all the way up to the cosmic entities? And then having that as almost like, maybe even mapping, if you had a module, like if you want to add or subtract different encounters,
Yes.
how you would sort of put onto there. And then I feel like, to me, the main bulk of your work focuses on, like, the biology. I'm sure there's a better word for it, but, like, what's there sort of make up the body plan is what you call it.
Yeah, there's a chapter on that, and finding inspiration in nature that we're less familiar with and might strike us as weirder.
Exactly. And you have a whole, again, obviously a bibliography at the end of, like, here's all the stuff that I've inspired. Yeah, which is always great. Again, for me, yes, I see it as a way of you working out how things are and then sharing it to other people. It feels more like an academic text to me, because you've got all your research, all the sort of, like, come and check these out. So it's always like, yes, it feels verifiable that these monsters do exist in the real world. We just need to go look for them.
And it's funny because after the book was already written and was in process of proofreading, I saw a video by one of your actual play group, Chamonix Bundle, who is a video science educator,
nature
communicator. And and I watched one of her things. I think it was on starfish.
Yes.
And I said, oh, this is good stuff. And you know what? I bet she would dig this book.
Yeah, so she
And
was telling me beforehand, she's like, I've had this contact with this guy. And I was like, I'm having an interview with him. So yes, no. Yeah, anything by nature, and certainly as a science communicator, she puts out all these amazing little shorts of stuff about like just nuggets of information. It's always fascinating. So yeah, big shout out to the nature YouTube where Sharmony works. Such a small world in a way.
Put a link in the comments here.
Yeah, I think that starfish one is one of her best ones in the last year or so. So I'm glad it's getting the recognition.
It's such a delightful watch. I share those with my my 6 3/4-year-old.
So yeah, so you talk about the body plan and like, you know, how weird nature is, but like how if you're going to do stuff like this, if you want to have extra limbs for that, making sure it kind of works in a way. You're not doing the sort of hand flappy way of like, oh, magic or science. It's like these things work because then it feels realistic. It feels, whilst you obviously describe that monsters being just sort of strange, unfamiliar, and dangerous, this feels like, wow, this does work, and you feel more immersed as a result. And then you have a chapter on like monsters as symbolic or themes as well. And I really appreciated, you also have loads of tables in this as well. So I'm like, oh, hooray. Again, more like academic texts than anything else, but showing like, hey, even damage could be symbolic, and how do you tie that back? And I liked how, again, I don't know if you would necessarily start with monsters as symbolic. I think people might try to, but like even if you take a monster block and go like, okay, their damage type is this, well, here's themes related to that, and so you might be like, oh, how can I build back up from there? So I thought that was really interesting, having these at the beginning, these 3 chapters, obviously going like logistical, how these creatures are physically in the natural world like work, and then symbolic, and then like a combination of those 3 to sort of start you off. And then obviously I know you go into more detail about other things, but I just thought, wow, what a really strong start. The first 200 pages just really feels like, yeah, these are the big concerns, and I think you just outlined them really beautifully.
And that's why I describe it as a toolbox rather than a checklist, because you can start anywhere. You can start at any point. You can say, I want to create a monster to represent this, and build from there. Or you can say, I just need something for my first level characters to encounter, and start from there. Or you can do as I did and look at a restaurant menu and say, oh, haha, this says scrambled eggs.
Yes.
Scamble. That's a funny word, scamble. What would a scamble look like? And go from there. And that's actually one of the monsters that I create in the book, the scamble, which is sort of my own first foes entry, which are basically these gibbons with crab-like bodies who descend on a marketplace like monkeys in India and just start wreaking havoc. Loads more fun than rats in the basement.
Exactly. Well, that's what I liked about obviously describing your philosophy or the point of view of like how these things work. And then at the end of each chapter, you go, okay, let's put this into practice. But actually, again, as you said, almost like working out the problem. And like you said, like, well, I need a monster for X, or, oh, I've seen this or whatever. But yeah, something as simple as like, I think I wrote down the one I really enjoyed. Because again, pronunciation is always not my strong point either. But the, is it the Sheercar you had? The sort of like the
Sheercar, yeah.
Yeah, the Sheercar, which is, again, for me, like I take on these automatic driving cars now, as it were. And I just thought that's a really cool problem. And again, showcase that not all these sort of villains or the enemies are creatures, as we would describe it. It could be inanimate objects or the environment. I know you talk about later on about like, what if it's just literally a limb of a cosmic creature and you're having to battle that rather than like the full-on creature.
Yeah. Or what if it's a pattern on a wall, you know?
So I like how it's like, hey, maybe breaking out of the box. Like you said, we all start with like, you're in a tavern, oh, it's rats in the basement, and then it's goblins. There's always like that procedural sort of thing to become a D&D hero, right? But what if to make it more memorable? Because that's the key thing I got from reading this, is like you want to make any encounter you have memorable, and you like want to be like, wow, because this creature did X, Y, or Z. And it's just like, well, first of all, you need to break out what your sort of definition of a monster or an enemy is, and go beyond like 1 or 2 steps beyond the box of like, well, they are typically creatures that look weird, or are they humans or anything like that. And yeah, that's the thing I was going to say. In the sort of logistics part in that first chapter, that's where you come in with the motivations. And so like there's all these like sort of 10, 13 different motivations, and like going, these could apply to anyone. It doesn't have to be like it's a human in a suit. It could be anyone, but you just tweak a way about it. And I just thought, yeah, it's a nice way to sort of be refreshing about like, okay, how can we go from here that's one step beyond? Almost, yeah, it's not even like being lazy. I don't want to call it that, but like, how can you make your sessions better by just doing these little steps? So yeah, and then you sort of go on to go into more detail about these like monster stunts, which is like, okay, so now you've got this sort of concept and you kind of know exactly what your creature is, but then talking about sort of the setup to it. So this is how you're in the middle of the battle now, having these sort of like 1-2 punches that players can be excited about.
I played a ton of volleyball in high school, so I think of it as set spike.
Set spike, yes, exactly. What I appreciated here was not only like saying like, okay, they'll, these monsters might be, also these enemies, sorry, might be resistant to certain things. So your players have to be a little bit more sort of like aware, combat aware and environmentally aware, but also on the other side of it, like showcasing and sort of like spotlighting characters who might not always get the kill or might not. And I really thought that was really interesting, because sometimes, we've all been there where you go, oh, I'm the spellcaster and my spells keep fizzling out, or I don't hit or anything like that. But then having monsters who have a weakness or a quirk or something where your chance to shine to sort of set up and help your other party members be able to. I just thought that was really interesting. I hadn't, again, not considered it, but it's not been talked about. I believe it's not been talked about. So I just wanted to, chat about that. Was that always something that you wanted to include?
I think it's not talked about because there's a norm that we want to be fair to all our players, but fair isn't always equal. And, sometimes I've seen these pictures go around that purport to illustrate the difference between equality and equity.
Yes.
Sometimes you need to move away from the equality and go for the equity. If there's somebody who's been hogging the spotlight, or if there's somebody who has been just not given the opportunities to be effective, that is a situation that you can and should redress. It is not unfair to do that, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. What it does is it's not even-handed in the sense that, well, you're actively nerfing one of your PCs for an encounter, but it is even-handed in the sense of you're trying to make sure all your players get the same opportunities to shine, so it's like it's a big picture fairness as opposed to a zoom lens fairness. And as gamers, we tend to miss the forest for the trees quite a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have been in things where I just focus on myself and like, well, I can do this one thing. And, it gets to a point where it's just trading hit points. But actually being like, wait, well, my party member can do this thing. We can work together and start to think strategically. I mean, I know players do this anyway, but actually being aware of what other people can do.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. So just thought it was so interesting as a way to, again, not to railroad players into be like, think about this, but like as like encouraging people to be like, right, talk to each other, like be a party without, and obviously I know you're a big role player as well as I am, but like, sometimes people find that really hard to do, but having this introduced like, hey, if you know what these people can do, you can work together.
And sometimes people feel like the system is pushing them in a certain direction. And, I don't really go into this in the book, but what you said a moment ago made me think of it. Maybe it's not a particular PC you want to nerf. Maybe they're just leaning too much on a particular ability. And so maybe you want to create a monster whose explicit purpose is to give the warlock an opportunity to use a very cool ability that is not Eldritch Blast.
Yeah. Get out of their comfort zone. Trying something that they know is risky, but if their usual tactic isn't working, it will get them engaged and think about it a bit more. Like, turn on dead for paladin, all that sort of thing as well, or smiting things. God, they love smiting, don't they? But yeah, I think that was just so interesting to me. And again, I just thought, and like you said, you've done it with your other books of like talking about player tactics and stuff like that. But I just thought it was nice to have that included in here, so that you're not going it's not just how to make an enemy. It's like, okay, how do I make an enemy that makes the players better players? If you see what I mean.
I mean, I don't frame it in those terms, but I don't disagree with that either.
That's what I mean.
I am kind of a teacher at heart, and I believe in tough love.
Yes.
So
you will learn, I promise. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other sort of big thing I wanted to highlight was the chapter talking about where stop does not always equal kill. We know that D&D and a lot of these RPGs, at the center of them, it is combat. And there's no getting away from it. And it is a big part of it. But often you maybe have situations where your players don't want to outright kill this creature. And I thought what was interesting is that teaching people that there are other ways to do it. And like, as you sort of mentioned, there's systems that give XP for finding other ways that are not violence. And so you still get it. It's not a mechanical thing, but it's like, how do we, get through that to people and like set up scenarios where, wait, the real threat isn't this creature. It's been purported to do so. Again, it's that sort of thing where I agree with everything that you wrote about it. It was just nice to have it in a way to be like, consider this. Like, we've gone through all this stuff. You created this creature, but what if they're not? They're not the enemy here. How do you players grapple with that?
Or what if they are the enemy, but there is also a better way to solve the problem that they cause than bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing?
Yeah, it's just changing your attitude to things and come up problems at a different way as well, which again comes from that teacher moment as well. But I just thought, because again, a lot of times there's this other stuff about people like are moving away from certainly D&D to be like, well, we want it to be more roleplay, we want more emotion stuff, but they still want the system, and it's like, well, the combat, certainly, if anything, from what your blogs to go by, say, well, these creatures are made to be used tactically and in fighting and stuff. So how do we balance these sort of player expectations, maybe newer ex-players or people who want to just try something new? With all that, then you sort of bring that together, and then it's like, okay, now how do we customize this campaign? You've got the creature. Do you create the adventure around it and stuff like that? So yeah, I guess, where do you tend to start creating a creature? Do you think about the campaign first or the creature? And I know you've got so many different ways of doing it, and you've given loads of examples of it, but is there one particular way you always sort of go to?
Well, in this book, I experimented with a whole bunch of different approaches, and I just let whatever inspired me inspire me. In the past, when I have created monsters for an adventure, it's usually been driven by the needs of the adventure. For example, when we were doing our Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I tried to give every PC in the party a personal side quest. I didn't succeed with all of them. Like, one of them, well, okay, you know what? I can't think of anything good for you. Your personal side quest is just Tiamat. That's you. Like, you're the one who's going to be the hero at the very end.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, we got some other stuff. And for our druid, who was a dwarf druid from the Vast, her backstory was that basically her clan was destroyed by war, and she believed that their warlike nature, it wasn't their nature, but they were driven to it from an elemental imbalance of a kind. And so her personal side quest began first with the discovery of this artificer who was making these weapons that threatened the current political balance in another region. But then it turned out this artificer, who was a half-gnome genasi, was the son of an Ifrit who lived in the city of Brass. And when they went to her palace to confront her, they found actually that a large number of the druids former clanmates had been abducted and taken there.
Mm-hmm.
So she got the chance to rescue them as well.
Mm.
So for that whole thing, I mostly used creatures from the monster manual, but I created the Genasi Artificer, and I also created some constructs that were being produced by the Genasi Artificer. Basically battle bots, and honestly, they weren't that well designed, because this was quite a few years ago and I was still early in my learning process. It predated this book by several years. But if I could go back and do it now, I would approach it very differently. But it would still be fundamentally driven by the needs of the adventure. What kind of themes do I want to explore? What kind of constructs is this artificer going to construct and try to sell to other people, these petty nobles squabbling over land? And how am I going to make them something that obviously should not be proliferating?
Yeah. How do you make your players care about it? Like, I know, like you said, like the personal side quests, you have that in personal invested interests, but like as soon as they're hooked, it's like, right, and you want to make it a satisfying, like presumably fight at the end, because obviously, again, D&D always does tend to go towards that. But at the same time, like you could have that conversation and then you realize, all these things to it. And then it's like, now you make the choice. The choice is on you. The players have to be proactive because you've set all those sort of elements up. And whether they choose to go in, not soft, that's not what I'm thinking of, but like to do that negotiation or just go, no, we need more than words here. It's time to escalate. I think it's a powerful thing because you make the players think.
Yeah, let it be a choice. Don't let them sleepwalk into it. Let them ruminate on it for a little while.
And keep those choices that they would probably talk about for years afterwards as well. Like going like, wow, I don't know if I made the right choice, or I think I did. And just because, again, it comes back to the big philosophy of this book of like, make it rememberable no matter what it is, whether it is a creature's attack or the encounter itself or the general sort of the symbolic vibes of it. Because players pick up on this. And I know we talked about like in person versus online recently, but like if what you do is that your enemies that you put together, if that's the thing that people remember, then that's a big step. And, I just, it's that sort of thing where for me, always I do at the end of my sessions, and I don't know if you do it yourself, we do that sort of like, it's called Stars and Wishes, but it's where you go around and you go, something I really loved about the session, something I wish would happen. And it was always really satisfying as a GM to be not necessarily, I thought the GM did this character really great or anything like that, or so. But when they talk about each other, I thought that was a really cool move you did against this enemy or this encounter. Because again, as we talked about before, it's like because they're talking to each other, trying to defeat together. But then it'll be like, wow, the fight itself was really scary or memorable because of these descriptive things that you did, as well as then the attack or the sort of follow-up had a big impact on it.
One of the fun things about that particular adventure, I mean, the combat with the Ifrit was a straightforward combat. It was the Ifrit and some salamander lieutenants. But when it came to freeing all of the captive dwarves, that was in this giant forge yard where there were too many salamander overseers for the player characters to take on. And so what they had to do instead was sneak around and free enough of the dwarves who were shackled, unshackle enough of the dwarves so that they in turn could go and unshackle others. And after a certain number of rounds of this, enough of them would be freed for the dwarves to rise up and overpower the salamanders themselves. And so then the PCs would only have to actually deal with a smaller number of them that they could manage.
So yeah, thinking strategically about that, but also having a presumably very satisfying cinematic moment almost as well, being like, and that rise up.
And the tension of trying to sneak around and not be caught.
I can imagine, your heart's going as well, because you're like, if one wrong move and then there's like a much bigger fight on your hands, that could be a TPK, so. my big question to you, and I appreciate it's not necessarily in the book itself, although it may be. It's just like, so you talk about when you're coming up with creatures, getting the names of creatures from either like sort of arcane British phrases or like you've like a corruption or something like that. But I really struggle at the best of times of coming up with monster names. Do you have any go-to advice of like how do you name your monsters in a way at all like that? I know I'm not necessarily about it, but like I know players might not even know what the monsters' names are, but I just, yeah, in general, I just was very curious.
I am a gigantic linguistics nerd.
Yes.
And that is, I guess, if you're a gigantic linguistics nerd too, yay, you can do what I do. But if not, you might have issues. I don't know what specific advice to give you other than like learn lots of languages. But I don't know. I mean, just go with sound, you know? There were a couple of instances in which the name inspired the monster, like the Scamble.
Mm-hmm.
I just, in my head, I thought a Scamble was a funny name and would be a good monster. And what would a Scamble look like? It sounds kind of like scramble. It sounds kind of like scamp or scamper.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it can, leap from place to place and so in that instance, it was just coming up with a monster that fit the word that was already in my head. But for something like Quarox, for that I used Wiktionary, which is the best source for etymology. I don't even know how it got so good for that. You'd think there'd be some authoritative published source that would, be as reliable or more reliable for etymologies, but nope, it's Wiktionary and it's really good. So, if you take a word like Latin warax, which means ravenous, and then look at where that came from in Proto-Indo-European and then say, okay, based on what we know about how English evolved, what would this Proto-Indo-European hypothesized word turn into? And according to the rules that are on the Wikipedia articles about the history of Old English and whatnot, it came out as Quarox.
Yeah, I like that.
And I liked it. I mean, because Quarox is an aberration, and it's a good aberration kind of name with the Q and the X. It just happened to really fit well. For other things like the Thrutcher, which I dance around it in the book, but the Thrutcher is toxic masculinity as a monster.
I did get that vibe weirdly.
Yeah. It's about pressing down, it's about holding down, pressing down, crushing. In that case, since I didn't want to be super, super obvious that that's what I was doing with English, so I went to German. And I went to the word drucken, which means to print or to press. And in German, the words for oppression are related to that.
Okay.
So I took that back to West Germanic and I'm like, okay, now if I brought this forward in English, what does it sound like? And there was actually an Old English word, thritchan, which meant to press down or suppress or oppress. And so that became Thrutcher, because it's not just about oppressing others, it's about suppressing one's own feelings. So it's that combination of things. It's all about constriction, and that's what the Thrutcher does.
This is the thing, because obviously you make it sound not obvious. That's not the word, but like it makes more sense because obviously I feel like if I give myself the chance to name things, and yeah, I'm sure I could do it, but I feel like just having that weight of evidence around it just feels like it fleshes it out to be a real creature. Because obviously we talked before about these, scientifically, if it works in this world, you want to give it a good name for it rather than just something in your notes. And the players want to know as well. I know there's a game called Trophy Dark, which doesn't give any names to its creatures or any of the monsters, but the players, they have their own bestiary, and when they go back to town, they can ask people and then write what their version of the monster is, like write it down.
That's terrific. That's terrific. I mean, I don't really go into this in the book, but it's one thing if you're writing for publication and you need to give something a name so that other people know what to call it. But if you're just writing an adventure for yourself, you're under no obligation to call it anything. In fact, not giving it a name, there's a lot of power in not naming something, because then there's no shortcut by which your players will make sense of it. They have to make their own sense of it. You know, years and years and years ago, I ran a game. This was back like early college, maybe even pre-college, I forget. I ran a solo adventure for a friend of mine, his elf fighter and some NPCs, and they had to confront a monster in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And it was terrifying. It regenerated and stuff like that. It was a troll. It was just a troll, but I never said the word troll.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, he's like, "What was that?" It was a troll. Oh, wow. I had no idea. That was really cool. You know, the not knowing is part of the unfamiliarity that is part of what makes a monster. You know, a monster is a monster because it is unfamiliar, because it's dangerous, and because it's in some way unnatural.
Yeah.
And so anything you can do to elevate the unfamiliarity is going to make it a more memorable encounter. And that includes not telling your players what it is that they're up against.
I totally see that now. And yeah, I guess for me, because obviously, as you said, the key thing is like, is this for publication for other people to use? And then you should give it a name of some sort just so it's easily searchable and stuff like that. But actually, yeah, I like that sort of almost permission to make it, yeah, it is more scary the less that is defined about it in the world that you're playing. And so it makes it feel real and more engaging because you're like, well, what is it? And then they come up with their own theories of what it is. And again, just another way for them to engage about if they fight a similar creature again, they know what they're up against, but they're not, it's not in a set terms because it's still like an unknowable thing.
And you can give a monster a name like Hriskzon or something like that you just make up off the top of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, whatever. That's good for some people.
Yes.
But for me, I like monsters to have names that sound like somebody called them that. Somebody saw a reason to call them that and called them that.
Mm-hmm.
So really, of all the monsters in Making Enemies, I think the only one that is really just kind of a nonsense phrase that doesn't mean anything is Jabvolith. The thing from Pandemonium.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in Pandemonium, it doesn't have to make sense. I imagine that as just like a little snatch of radio noise, for lack of a better phrase, that some wizard somewhere picked up while trying to track this thing and figure out what it was, and they just stuck the name on because they didn't know what else to call it.
Oh, that's really cool. Like the idea of like, you know, those ghost box that you just get snatches of radio waves and it's like, oh, a ghost is speaking to you. I love that idea that it is just a little bit of static and corruption of words that you just hear. That's such a really cool idea. The final thing I would quickly just want to mention about the book, again, I feel it's very unique to your work in general before we sign off, is in this one that you obviously interview other game designers as well. Was that something that you always planned to do? Because obviously, presumably you are talking with other people all the time, but to include your conversations with people about how they make enemies for their games and different systems and what goes into it.
So with each of my books now, I'm trying to ask myself, what can I add to elevate this a little, you know, to give the readers something more than they might have even expected from me. And I was a journalist for the first 10 years of my career. I worked as a copy editor. And for 5 years of that, I did news, feature, and opinion writing.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some interview skills. And so I decided to put them to use and, you know, bring in some conversations with people who are doing monster and creature design and are distinguished in that space and share some of what they have to say about it. You know, ideas beyond my own ideas and perspectives beyond my own perspectives, and you know, allow this to flesh it out some more and expose readers to these people if they're not familiar with what they're doing. And So yeah, several people very generously were willing to share their time and their opinions in that way, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed talking to all of them.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it was quite a delight to have them and obviously go over the different aspects, not only of their game, but obviously in the chapter you're doing. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I felt that was really unique as well. And like, again, I feel that you are a generous person and just being able to share that as well. But I think some really good conversations in there. So yeah, I would highly recommend folks to check it out. Regardless, obviously, we talked about its amazing sort of uniqueness in terms of the different systems. So like if you're only playing a certain system, you will find something for you, but also just that exposure to other people like talking about how they create monsters and what they're thinking about. I just thought was really, really insightful. So yeah, I just wanted to say, kudos. I think that was a really cool thing to do. Thank you so much, Keith, for coming on and talking about making enemies. I'm really excited that this book is going to be out in the world. Tell us, where can we find your work, and when is Making Enemies appearing in bookshops? And is there anything else you would like to plug, or anything else that you're working on that you can talk about?
Well, Making Enemies will be available in North America on October 7th, but it is already available for pre-order. You can go to your favorite bookseller or to my bookshop affiliate is bookshop.org/shop/spy and owl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still writing at The Monsters Know What They're Doing, themonstersknow.com, and I have a newsletter I've recently begun called 1 Foot in Fairyland, which is thatphrasesolid.com. And I will be at GameholeCon this year running games and debuting the book. I will be at PAX Unplugged, and I'm still nailing down 2026, but we'll see.
Oh, amazing. Well, best of luck with everything. And yeah, enjoy those conventions as well.